Good morning, dear students. Dear students, this is part 3 from chapter Mother's Day, and we have to start from page number 6. Okay, so students, without making delay, let's start. So Mrs. Pearson said, "Not likely. I have got to deal with your family first. That's the idea, isn't it? Didn't you know how to begin with them?" You said, "Well, I will show you, Mrs. Fitzgerald, but I am going to do, Mrs. Pearson. Go into my house for a bit. There's nobody there. Then pop back and see how we are doing. You ought to enjoy it. Better get off now before one of them comes." Mrs. Fitzgerald, nervously rising, "Yes, I suppose that's best. You are sure it will be all right?" Mrs. Pearson, chuckling, "It will be wonderful. Now off you go, dear." Right. So Mrs. Pearson wants to get back in her body, while Mrs. Fitzgerald is strongly of the opinion that she should deal with the family first. Mrs. Pearson did not know where to begin from, so Mrs. Fitzgerald would do it for her, right? And she asked she should do in the meantime. So she instructed her to go to Mrs. Fitzgerald's house, which is vacant for now, and she could visit in a while to see the progress. But till then, she is supposed to take pleasure in the process. She then tells her to go before someone sees her, right? And realizing that this is happening, the now Mrs. Fitzgerald gets up to leave and confirms once again if all is going to work, right? And chuckling means laugh quietly, right? Mrs. Pearson reassures her and tells her to leave, right? Mrs. Fitzgerald crosses and hurries out through the door, right? Left to herself, Mrs. Pearson smokes away, lighting another cigarette, and begins laying out the cards for patience on the table. After a few moments, Doris Pearson comes bursting in left. She is pretty girl in early 20s who would be pleasant enough if she would not be spoiled. "Doris, before she has taken anything in, Mum, you will have to iron my yellow silk. I must wear it tonight." She now sees what is happening and is astounded. "What are you doing?" She moves down left center. Mrs. Pearson now uses her ordinary voice, but her manner is not fluttering and apologetic but cool and incisive. Mrs. Pearson, not even looking up, "What would you think I am doing? Whitewashing the ceiling." Doris, still astounded, "But you are smoking." Mrs. Pearson, "That's right, dear. No law against it is there." Doris, "But I thought you didn't smoke." Mrs. Pearson, "Then you thought wrong." Doris, "Are we having tea in the kitchen?" Mrs. Pearson, "Have it where you like, dear." Doris, angrily, "Do you mean isn't it ready?" Mrs. Pearson, "Yours is not. I have had all I want. Might go out later and get a square meal at the Clarendon." Right? Doris, hardly believing her ears, "Who might?" Right? So Mrs. Pearson reassures her and tells her to leave, while Mrs. Fitzgerald leaves, and Mrs. Pearson attempts to make herself comfortable by lighting another cigarette and sorting her cards. And after a while, Doris Pearson, a girl of about 20 or so, enters, and she was the daughter of Mrs. Pearson and had the potential of turning out well hadn't she been or were pampered, right? And astounded means shocked. You can also see the astonished, right? So without noticing, Doris instructs her mom to iron her yellow silk dress as she is supposed to go out that night. And as she noticed her mom, she was even startled there. She was shocked, right? And asked what she was doing, right? Now you have to write the meaning of fluttering. Fluttering. Fluttering means trembling, right? Fluttering means trembling, and incisive means intelligently analytical, right? That means you can also write here that the clear thinking, right? As she is about to speak, she uses her normal calm voice instead of the usual regretful and the sky voice. She looks at her and sarcastically asks her what according to her was she doing. She was not showing any surprise. किसी तरह का आश्चर्य दिखाया नहीं उसने, है ना? And she was asking again instead of that, she was asking that was she painted the ceiling. She points out that her mother is smoking and that the fact she shocked Mrs. Pearson is not usually seen smoking, right? Again, in a very calm manner, Mrs. Pearson replies that she saw is right and tells that it's common, right? And there is no law against the smoking. So Doris was shocked because she thought Mrs. Pearson doesn't smoke, and Mrs. Pearson replied bluntly that she was wrong, right? And Dory asked for the tea, and Mrs. Pearson replied that they can have wherever she wishes. She can have her tea. And annoyed with her mom, she asked it means the tea was not ready. Mrs. Pearson replied that she had all the tea she wanted and there is none ready for Doris. She then says that she might go out for a meal at Clarendon, right? And a bit more shocked, she asked Mrs. Pearson who would go out for a meal, right? Means everything that was happening there was shocking for Doris because it was happening first time, right? Mrs. Pearson was smoking. She has not prepared. She has not made the tea. That was even impossible to think, right? But it was being happened. That's why Doris was expressing like that, right? And Doris, starting at her, Mrs. Pearson, right? Mrs. Pearson says, I might. Well, who do you think? Doris, staring at her, Mom, what's the matter with you? Don't be silly, Mrs. Pearson said. Doris, indignantly, it's not me that is being silly, and I must say, it is a bit much when I have been working hard all day and you can't even bother to get my tea ready. Did you hear what I said about my yellow silk? Mrs. Pearson, no, I don't. You like it now? I never did. Doris indignantly, of course I like it and I am going to wear it tonight, so I want it ironed. Mrs. Pearson, want it ironed? What do you think it's going to do? Iron itself. Doris, no, you are going to iron it for me. You always do. Well, this time I don't. And don't talk rubbish to me about working hard. I have a good idea how much you do. Doris Pearson, I put in twice the hours you do and get no wages nor thanks for it. Why are you going to wear your yellow silk? Where are you going? Doris sulkily, out with Charlie Spence. Mrs. Pearson, why? Then Doris wildly, why? What's the matter with you? Why shouldn't I go with Charlie Spence if he asks me and I want to? Any objection? Go on, might as well tell me. Mrs. Pearson severely, can't you find anybody better? I would not be seen dead with Charlie Spence, but buck teeth and half-witted, right? Doris, he isn't. Mrs. Pearson, when I was your age, I would have found somebody better than Charlie Spence or given myself up as a bad job. Doris, nearly in tears, oh, shut up. Doris runs out left. Mrs. Pearson chuckles and begins putting the cards together. After a moment, Cyril Pearson enters left. He is masculine counterparts of Doris. Right. So here, Mrs. Pearson again tells her that she might go out for a meal and she was talking about herself only. So Doris senses that there is something wrong and asks Mrs. Pearson about the reason. Then indignantly means, you have to write indignantly means a manner indicating anger. Indignantly, right? Indignantly. Indignantly, right? So indignantly means in a manner that indicate anger, right? So here, thinking that it's unfair to her, she exclaimed that she is not being foolish, right? And she thinks that it's very hard to take that she is been working hard, and when she comes tired, she cannot even expect a cup of tea. And she then asks Mrs. Pearson if she heard instructions about her yellow silk. Mrs. Pearson refuses to have heard anything about her dress, and she asks Doris if she knew now likes being treated like how they have been treating Mrs. Pearson. And rudely, she tells Mrs. Pearson that she has no problem with it and she wants her yellow dress ironed so that she can wear it. But Mrs. Pearson asks Doris what she means when she says she wants the dress ironed, because the dress is not going to iron itself, right? Doris tells that she wants Mrs. Pearson to do like she always does, but Mrs. Pearson refused her iron the dress, and this time and tells her not to brag about the long iron she works hard, but for because Mrs. Pearson herself worked twice hours as Doris has never have once complained in life, nor she has thanked for it. She doesn't even get paid. So she then asked Doris where she supposed to go that night. Right? You will have to write again the meaning like the sulkily. Right? Meaning of sulkily. Sulkily means in a disagreeable mood, right? When you are not able to even agree for something, so that will be called the sulkyable. So she replies that she is supposed to go out for dinner with Charlie Spence, and she asks Doris on what occasion she is going out with Charlie. Then Doris got annoyed and tells her that Charlie wanted to go and definitely she also wants to do, right? And she irritably asks Mrs. Pearson if she objects to do that. If yes, she might as well spit it out. Doris doesn't understand what's wrong with her mother, and Mrs. Pearson asks very seriously if she could find anyone better than Charlie Spence. She thinks he doesn't look like that nice as also very intelligent. And Doris defends Charlie Spence, right? Mrs. Pearson brags even she would have better job at finding a good boy, someone who must have been better than Charlie Spence. Had she failed at doing so, she would have given up finding anyone, declaring that she is bad. And almost crying, Doris asked Mrs. Pearson to stop picking comments over Doris, or over Charlie, right? And then after Doris runs out, meanwhile Cyril enters inside the room. Cyril briskly, "Hello ma'am, tea is ready." Mrs. Pearson said no. Cyril moving to the table annoyed, "Why not?" Mrs. Pearson coolly, "I couldn't bother." Cyril, "Feeling off color or something?" Mrs. Pearson, "Never felt better in my life." Cyril aggressively, "What's the idea then?" Mrs. Pearson, "Just a change." Cyril briskly, "Well, snap out of it, ma, and get cracking. Haven't too much time." Cyril is about to go when Mrs. Pearson voice checks him. Mrs. Pearson, "I have plenty of time." Cyril, "Yes, but I haven't got a busy night tonight." Moving left to the door, "Did you put my things out?" Mrs. Pearson coolly, "Can't remember, but I doubt it." Cyril moving to the table, protesting, "Now look, when I asked you this morning, you promised, you said you would have to look through them first in case there was any mending." Mrs. Pearson, yes, now I have decided I don't like mending." Cyril, "That's nice way to talk. What would happen if we all talk like that?" Mrs. Pearson, "You all do like that. If there's something at home you don't want to do, you don't do it. If it is something at your work, you get the union to bar it. Now all that's happened is that I have joined the movement." Cyril staggered, "I don't get this, ma'am. What's going on?" Mrs. Pearson, iconic and sinister change. Doris enters left. She is in the process of dressing and is now wearing a wrap. She looks pale and red-eyed. Mrs. Pearson, "You look terrible. I wouldn't wear that face." even for Charlie Spence. Right? And Doris, moving above the table angrily, oh, shut up about Charlie Spence, and anyhow, I am not ready yet, just dressing. And if I do look terrible, it's your fault. You made me cry. Right? Now here, so briskly means in an active way. Cyril asked Mrs. Pearson for the tea, and she replied the tea was not ready. Then she asked the reason, and Mrs. Pearson tells him that the tea is not ready, which annoys him, and thus he moves towards the table and asking her the reason behind the tea being not made. And Cyril at the same time being all chilled, right? She conveys that she is feeling her best. On hearing her reply, he turns argumentative and asks her to explain. And Mrs. Pearson says that the tea is not ready, just to break the monotony, right? And he tells her to stop resisting and make tea for him, commanding tone. He tells her that he is in hurry like usual. But Mrs. Pearson stops him and says that he might be in hurry, but she is all relaxed because she has a plenty of time. Right? Cyril, being a spoiled child, replies that he is short of time and it is going to be a long tonight. He asks Mrs. Pearson if all his things are ready. So in a very chilled out manner, she says she can't recall taking them out, probably because she didn't take them out. In attempt to raise an objection, Cyril moves towards Mrs. Pearson and reminds her that she promised him to keep them ready, and she even committed to fix them in the case they needed any repairs. But Mrs. Pearson said that she has now changed her mind because she has realized that she doesn't like sewing even or fixing. Right? And he objects to Mrs. Pearson's way of speaking and asks her she would feel if all of them talked to her like that. But Mrs. Pearson clarifies that they already talk to her in an objectionable tone. They do what they want and leave what they don't. At home, they have been given this privilege, and is the situation in this office where if they don't like something, they get the union to interfere. She mentions that what has now changed is that she started acting the same way where she wants what she doesn't want to. And staggered means, the meaning of staggered, staggered, means astonished, surprised, right? So deeply shocked by his mom's reply, he attempts to know what's the matter. And you will have to write the meaning of laconic, laconic. Laconic means to speak very few words, right? And the meaning of sinister, right? Giving the impression that something harmful is going to happen. So choosing not to speak a lot, she implies that things are going to change from now on. Doris appears on the scene with her eyes turned red and her face. Mrs. Pearson asks her what's wrong and how would she go with Charlie Spence with this face, right? And Doris said it was just his all steamed up. Doris tells her mom to told her tongue about Charlie Spence. She further adds that she is not ready yet, and the reason behind her awful look is that her mother, right? So students, that was the third part. We will meet in the next video with part 4. Up to the time, thank you. Have a nice day.